So recently, Rarity, Applejack, and Rainbow Dash went on a now annual camping trip with their younger sisters on their way to Winsome Falls. But things went wrong when a swarm of flyders attacked. Annoying little buggers. I thought greenheads were horrible, but these things not only bite and sting, but they web you up as well. Almost as annoying as Twitter mites, but I'd rather be bitten and webbed than electrocuted. Under invasion by bugs, these sisters take shelter in a cave and spend some time trying to make the best of things by recapping legends over the campfire, telling the legends of Rockhoof, a scrawny pony who lived long ago in a land far, far away, but learned how to be strong. Mistmane, a magically talented pony with a flowing mane similar to that of Celestia or Luna, who learned to sacrifice her own beauty to bring beauty back to those who were having beauty taken away from them. And Flash Magnus, a member of the Flying Royal Guard, which is what we had before we had the Wonderbolts, and was basically the equivalent thereof, who used his bravery and intelligence to face down and outsmart some dragons. After hearing these stories, the girls used the knowledge that they gained from those lessons to find the bravery in themselves and find a way out of the cave, following a underground river to an exit that ended up being a shortcut to Winsome Falls, where they would continue their camping trip and enjoy the weekend out, despite the minor setbacks. And there's a lot that I've been able to pick up from this episode, which is basically a strong continuity follow-up to Sleepless in Ponyville. Basically remembering the events that happened in that episode, saying that they've indeed happened before in the past, and showing that the ponies have grown and learned and improved from them, including Rarity packing a more sensible tent and coming with far less luggage than she had previously. It's nice to know that what the sisters had once done reluctantly has become an annual trip that they are enjoying, and to see that they've learned and grown from their past experiences and become better ponies. The addition of the Flyders is yet another danger that those who wish they lived in Equestria would have to face if they ever managed to reach Equestria, proving that it's not really as safe as one thinks. We get to see Rainbow Dash almost eat some berries that, according to a book from Studaloo, is poisonous, reminding me somewhat of the old Scouting Handbook, which would be full of useful information such as this. Not proof that that book in particular was from their pony scouting days, but I like to pretend that that was the case. For some people, what could have been an interesting episode just about the camping trip turned into what some call a boring episode about telling stories around a campfire. But for myself and many, many others, telling stories around the campfire was a really great way to expand on the legends and lore of Equestria and explore some of Equestria's history in much greater detail than we ever have before. And even nicer to see the different legends represent different parts of our world from our own history and past. The one group being what looks to be like Gauls or something Icelandic, or at the very least Scandinavian. not to be confused with Vikings. The winds on the helmet give away that these aren't Viking helmets, these are one of the other groups. We saw something Asian, possibly Chinese, with a fascinating new horn style to separate these unicorns from the ones that we see all the time, implying that there's subtle variance between the species, which makes them a slightly different race. Much like the Saudi Arabian horses were much taller than the other ponies and things like that. So it's a nice little species building, and the Asian culture is one that I have been looking forward to exploring. And looking at some of the background OCs, there is one unicorn with blue fur and a green mane who looks kind of like myself with a horn instead of being an earth pony. And that kind of reminds me of my other OC, the Dark Wizard Confuso, who is pretty much exactly this guy if he was wearing Sable Spirit's dark cloak and had turned evil. I wonder if there's some kind of connection between Confuso and the Chinese ponies, or if that's just all coincidental. And then we got to see these sort of Spartan, Roman, Greek-style armor ponies in Rainbow Dash's story as they went up against dragons. That may or may not be Torch. I mean, it is Torch's dragon design, but it could be just a reused sprite. I don't know if dragons would actually be older than the Wonderbolts and still be around, considering that the Wonderbolts were founded during Celestia's time, and this is before that. Speaking of Flash, Flash Madness sounds and looks a lot like Flash Sentry, so I wonder if there's a family connection between them, or if at the very least Flash Sentry was named in honor of Flash Madness. It would be interesting to dive more into that story, but at least the fandom has one Flash that everybody loves. It seems out of the three stories, the fandom in general, as well as myself, prefers the story of Mistmane. It was overall a really pretty looking village, well-told story, interesting and compelling and exciting. The new character designs were fascinating, and it was really interesting to see a character with a long flowing mane, much like Celestia and Luna's mane, without being an Alicorn princess. It would be fun to take Twilight, Fluttershy, and Pinkie Pie aside and have them tell stories to Starlight Glimmer about their favorite heroes from the past, and finally get to see Starswirl the Bearded and two other historical characters, find out more about them. Or maybe find out more stories about the Mage Meadowbrook, or some pony else that we've heard about in the past and just haven't seen until now. Hearing Apple Bloom yell out the word apple rot when she's frustrated definitely makes me think how glad I am this is a Y7 show. Otherwise we'd be quickly discovering that the Apple Sisters are some of the most swear word filled ponies in Equestria, for all the times that they shout out apple euphemisms while getting angry. We also learned something very fascinating, that Rarity's surprisingly good at making shadow puppets, especially for some pony with hooves instead of fingers. Although, to her credit, any cartoon character, whether they have hooves or fingers, always ends up doing that thing where they make shadow puppets that would be impossible. I've seen a lot of characters, even with fingers, that were talented enough at shadow puppets in cartoons that they could make shadows of things that hands simply can't do. So the fact that hooves could make those shadow puppets, that's just another step more forward on the when cartoon characters make shadow puppets. The shadow puppets are always something impossible trope. This was really great world building, and from what I hear, also a tie-in to the comics. I can't wait to see some of the reviews from the bronies who actually read the comics who would know more about that one. And while some people may question the things that happen in Legends, like a scrawny pony just magically gaining strength while digging a ditch to divert lava from a volcano, you have to keep in mind that these are legends, so the truth may be exaggerated at times, and that these events may not necessarily be accurate to history, if they even happened at all. That is, after all, what legends are all about. It's also interesting that the legends had something in them that was the value of each of the ponies that told them. Applejack's hero was strong just like Applejack is. Rarity's hero admired beauty just as she does. And Rainbow Dash's hero was loyal and brave just like she is. And I also enjoyed the lighting in this episode. Once the ponies enter the cave and you see things being lit up by Rarity's horn, the lighting and shadow effects are really impressive, especially the point where Rarity jumps into the river, and when her head goes underwater, the lighting is temporarily blocked out, and when her head goes above water again, the lighting comes back. It's a nice little attention to detail. There's also the detail that Sweetie Belle was using a shield spell to protect herself from the Flyders, which just shows her magic getting ever so stronger subtly in the background. A few other things that I noticed is that when this episode was being talked about by some of the reviewers who like to leak stuff, the leaked image for this episode is an image that actually never happened in this episode, which means someone either used fan art as clickbait, or they leaked an episode image from an episode that hasn't happened yet. More on that once more episodes come out. And the final stuff that I appreciated about this episode is the fact that these were all original stories. It would have been very easy to have just taken, like they did with Heartwarming Tale, and just done ponies doing Christmas Carol. How about ponies doing Jack and the Beanstalk, or ponies doing Johnny Appleseed, or ponies doing Paul Bunyan, and just taken stories we are already familiar with and just slipped ponies into them and not even tried to make up original stories. So at least these stories were original. And as these short stories go, this was 3 short stories inside our 22-minute format, and each of the short stories had a beginning, a middle, and an end. They set up a brand new location we'd never seen before, set up brand new characters we'd never seen before, got us invested in those characters and locations, had a problem, action, and a resolution, and a whole actual story in each one, in each of those time spans, those short time spans, and they concluded each of those 3 stories nicely with no problems and made each of the individual stories interesting. In the Equestria Girls Summertime shorts, those shorts are just too short and too uninteresting and too forgettable to even bother doing a review on most of them. Anyhow, that's about all I have to say about that. Thank you for watching, and good night.